So I'm just going to start out by talking about the context for the Enlightenment era. So basically, throughout history, most of the world's governments were ruled by monarchies or a variation of monarchies, such as a powerful, militaristic dictator like Napoleon, or maybe, by a council of aristocratic advisors. But I digress. Mainly in these types of governments, most of the peasants and all the, basically 90% of, at least 90% of the people were kind of unhappy because they didn't really have all the rights we have today, like freedom of speech and the right to private property and all that good stuff. So basically what happened over time is that, I don't know, what caused the Enlightenment era? I would maybe argue that, the education got a lot better and they started thinking philosophically hey, what happened? We need more rights for us. All we're doing is farming and whatnot, and we can't have anything for ourselves. The king is up there in his high tower with all the money, and we have nothing to our name. So you can say that a transition of power happened with the peasants and the king. And in this transition of power, basically what happened for France and America, from what I am aware of, a revolution happened, a very violent revolution for France. Basically, they were famous for using the guillotine over and over for killing off opposers of the revolution. But I kind of digress. France was basically the originator of the Enlightenment era. Basically, they were the ones that first started saying we need freedom, personal freedoms for the common man, and we all need a vote. We need to bring back democracy, and we do need to establish a secular government, one that doesn't involve religion. One of the main people who was a founder of this ideal was Voltaire. Voltaire, he was a very influential figure in France, especially in the Enlightenment era. He made over 20,000 pamphlets and papers. It's pretty insane. So he was one of the main figures. In England, a similar person was around named John Locke. John Locke wasn't necessarily as much for freedom of speech, but more that, they have the right to establish their own government. They have the right to rule themselves rather than another king or a dictator, which is very understandable. Another person was Montesquieu. He was another French Enlightenment era guy, figurehead if you would. Basically, that Montesquieu, he created the three branches of government that we know today. That there shouldn't just be one government, that they would become corrupt over time if we gave them too much power. So three governments, legislative, judicial, and executive, would be most to balance out the order. And how does all this crap relate to the US, you may be asking yourself? Well, I'll tell you. So we all know the founding fathers of the US. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, George Washington were the main ones, and John Adams. They were very influenced by the Enlightenment era, and they were influenced by the writings of John Locke, Voltaire, and all them. So basically, James Madison, who wrote the Constitution, he based it off of a lot of Voltaire's things, Montesquieu and John Locke. So he made the three branches of government. He, in the First Amendment, we have the right to freedom of speech. In other amendments, we have the right to a fair trial, the right to a jury, and all that good stuff. Thomas Jefferson. So for Thomas Jefferson, his main thing was the Declaration of Independence, right? So this was very much inspired by John Locke's ideal that man has the right to self-govern, which is why he was like, okay, you know what? We can take it from here, king. We're going to rebel against your monarchy and your tyranny. It's also probably important to note that the first few presidents were all deists. They actually didn't believe in... they didn't worship Christianity. They believed in a god, but they were separate, which probably influenced the separation of church and state, which is a common Enlightenment theme. So basically, to summarize all the direct things that the Enlightenment era granted us, it gave us freedom of speech, which basically wasn't around at all before, and it's arguable that other presidents kind of took that away at times, like John Adams, for one. But anyways, we have the right to private property, the right to democratic voting, which hasn't been around since Greece, if I'm correct. Fair trial, now it gave us the separation of church and state. So the countries that this influenced was Canada, for one, the United States, which we all know, France, obviously the originator, and Mexico. These are just a few to name. There's probably some minor ones that I'm forgetting about. Basically, Mexico, because they declared, you know, independence from Spain, just like the U.S., you know, rebelling against the mother country because we have the right to govern ourselves. France, easy one. United States, easy. Canada, they also declared independence. Basically, the independence thing. So maybe to do a kind of synthesis recap, many could argue that the Enlightenment era didn't bring like the exact results that it said it would, and not immediately. For example, not all people got the freedom of speech. Not all people got the right to vote. You know, basically, not all like people that weren't white. Women couldn't vote for like a long time. So basically, all the things, you know, that were kind of you know, we talked about a lot in the Enlightenment era weren't actually implemented in the United States for a very long time. But it's arguable that definitely it was a first start, you know. Not the first step is to get it to the powerful, then it'll slowly disperse down to the rest. And the way to end, that's the end, okay.